And we are live. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to CertaPay's coffee break number 22. And seems like it's gone by quite fast, and we're already at number 22. But we're glad you're here. Today we're talking about politics in the workplace. And I think it makes sense to talk about it now as we're approaching our official election date. I'm your host, Rachel Camella, and I'm here with Cindy Merkel from the HR team. She is our moderator this morning, and we're going to take good care of all of you and get to all your questions as we go through this interesting and exciting topic. So this is such a great topic because one of the things that makes this country amazing is all of the diverse views that we have. In a political climate like this one, it's a little bit different. We've got polarizing viewpoints, we've got extreme viewpoints, and we've got people who really want to talk about it or not talk about it, and pretty much everything in between. So for us, we chose to talk about it, and we think it's important to talk about it. We know that people are passionate about their views, but we also know that the diversity is very healthy. So we're going to embrace that. What that means is we have to maneuver very carefully through this for our businesses and for all of you, for the business owners and leaders. So when we talk about our conversation today, we're going to talk about free speech and what that really means, the language surrounding that, and how to add those layers to your company for best practices. We're going to talk about the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, and that is the policies that support employee rights. And then the NLRB, which is the federal agency that helps to support the NLRA. And company policies and best practices. So one of the things I really want to mention here is why this is important. And as a company, as a business owner, especially in private sector, you have the right to take a side. You have the right to take a stand. You can have employees wear a mask that has a certain logo on it. You can have employees wear hats with logo medallions that support a particular candidate. You're allowed to do that. The thing that we talk about in terms of best practice is think about the financial impact. And it is, while it is okay to do that, you want to consider what does that mean? And for most of us, we're providing a service that helps make people better. We're trying to make money. We're trying to have our businesses be successful. And so if you decide to take a political stance, you may eliminate or alienate certain viewpoints. So that's something that before you do that, you want to take that into consideration. And we've seen many examples of this over the last few months where a business will say, okay, we're going to require our employees to wear this X logoed mask or this X logoed hat or shirt or whatnot. And then they have customers who don't want to shop there anymore. They have employees who don't want to wear that. And so you're opening up this risk and exposure piece that's unnecessary. So again, you're allowed to do that, but think it through and think through all of the financial implications first, and then make the decision based on that. And finally, we'll talk about voting. As Cindy said, there are some regulations, and there are new regulations this year surrounding voting policies and procedures that state by state vary. And so we'll help you navigate through that, and we'll even provide you with that chart. All right, good so far?
Yep, we're good. Just one thing on the voting, just so you all know, and we will provide this information. Certain states require that you have to have it posted, the employees' voting rights. One couple states are literally 10 days before the election, and another one might be 10 working days. So it could be the matter of a 2-day difference in the date. But again, we're going to make sure you have that.
Right, and some of those we're already inside that window. You know, we're less than 2 weeks from our official voting date. And so again, we're going to talk about that. But yes, there are some posting requirements now that may not have applied before, but they do this year. Okay, so we want to talk about some misconceptions, and in particular with the concept of freedom of speech. And so you might hear people say, well, you know, I have the right to say anything I want at work because of freedom of speech. Well, this isn't entirely true. The First Amendment does not guarantee free speech at work. And it also, it applies to government action. It does not limit an employer's right to limit communication. So one of the things I say is you can't control what somebody thinks, but you can control the expectation of behavior in your business. So it's kind of this fine line, and we're going to talk more about those details coming up. It does not provide a constitutional right for employees to express their opinions. And political views are not a protected class, so we need to be careful about that. And where the gray area is when you have a person who might talk about political views and then it ends up crossing over into a protected class where a particular viewpoint about maybe immigration or about discrimination or about these other pieces that then come into play where a protected class would be involved. So political views themselves are not a protected class. So just having free speech in that broad arena doesn't quite apply. So another misconception is employees have a constitutional right to display and distribute political materials at work. Wrong again. They don't have a blanket right to do that. Employers have a right to adopt and enforce rules that prohibit non-work related activity, meaning you can say, you can put something up that says you're not going to have just a political discussion. But under the First Amendment, you have the right to talk about various things that are connected to the work. So the protections are limited. Employers may ban employees from displaying and distributing materials that are purely political. So this is what we talk about. An employer can say, we're not going to have any political logos. We're not going to have any political posters at all. You can ban that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And as a best practice, that's the recommendation that we talk about. If you want to limit and enforce where you can, it's better to say no political logos across the board and make blanket statements, and this will minimize the risk and protect you. Employers may ban computer and email use when it's purely political. So if you have an employee who uses your company computer to send out vote for X candidate, that's an issue. You're allowed to say you cannot use our computers for political purposes and distributing political material. And same thing with buttons on shirts, hats. If the message is purely political, you have the right to ban that material. And employees can actually be disciplined. So if you have these policies in place, and then you've got employees who are violating your company policies and procedures, you have the right to discipline them up to and including termination. And so we're going to talk some more about that in just a little bit, but it's important to know that just because we have this freedom of speech statement out there, it doesn't mean you don't have the option to control the behavior. Again, you can't control what somebody thinks, but you control the expectation of behavior in your business. There are some exceptions. It's important to talk about because, as Cindy mentioned with the voter rights and the regulations that may change, state laws vary quite a bit. So you want to be careful to check your state laws when it comes to these exceptions. And especially with some of the political activity in the free speech language, make sure you know what the exact state guidelines are. What we're talking about from a broad stroke are the federal guidelines, but there are some variations there along the way, state by state. Especially if you are a multi-state employer, you want to take a look at all the different guidelines within and then find the common ground or the most strict guideline, and then use that for all of your policies across your state lines. So the other exceptions that we have to talk about are the NLRA and the restrictions there. The restrictions are that employers the right to limit communication about wages. So you can say we're not allowing certain political conversations and political paraphernalia and messaging, but you cannot limit the right for your employees to communicate about specific things connected to the work. So wages, hours, safety conditions, anything that has to do with the actual work. And this is the point of the National Labor Relations Act. It's to protect the communication about the work. And then, of course, the NLRB is that federal agency that protects those guidelines and enforces those guidelines. And the NLRB recognizes all non-supervisory employees. So that means an area here for you to be particularly careful about is supervisors and managers and directors and senior level folks, because the NLRB is not going to protect those kinds of interactions and those employees. This is the NLRA is specifically speaking to the employees and the subordinates. And so when there's communication that's about the pay, then that's when the NLRA and the NLRB come into play. It's important to know that, and we're going to talk about some training and efforts you can do specifically for your supervisors, and that's an area where we really can see some impact and where it's important. And then also, employee statements and actions concerning political issues may be protected. And again, it's about being connected to the work. So if there are conversations, let's say somebody's having a political discussion about a particular candidate, and that candidate supports increasing minimum wage or supports safety measures and different guidelines that are connected directly to your work, these would be one of the exceptions where the conversation is permitted, and you want to be careful about how you would manage that. Again, behavior is what you can take a look at. All right, so now what do you do about it? Well, let's shift gears to you want to have a policy. Now we're 2 weeks out at this point. And so if you don't have a policy, now is a great time to get one in place and get help with this. It's not something you want to take lightly because the language is very specific. And just having an absolute ban on political communication, that would be not only unlawful, but impractical. So you really want to have, get some help and then prepare and implement a strong policy that speaks to no political activity, if that's the direction you want to go. And not only do you want to talk about that, but you want to talk about, carve-outs that you might have that apply to NLRA language or specific state laws. So again, having some help with that would be important. You want to comply with all of the NLRB and state regulations, and there are some restrictions on conversations, solicitation, distribution, computer use, all of these pieces. You may already have some pieces of these policies in place, like a solicitation, a non-solicitation or distribution policy, but go back and take a close look at it now and see what is the language around political activity, and then clean it up and tighten it up so it can help you navigate the next couple of weeks and possibly even beyond. We may have, You may have to implement some of these policies and best practices through the end of the year to navigate through this climate. It is a very unique year. Be prepared to address disruptive behavior. This is where we sometimes see an issue is you want to be consistent. You want to take away any possibility of discrimination here so that anyone who violates your policies is treated the exact same way. Be swift, be prompt, be consistent. Don't allow this behavior. Again, same concept. You can't control what people think. You may be able to limit some of the conversations, but you can definitely write policies that speak to the behavior. And in any case, having disruptive behavior in the workplace is something that you can have very specific policies about and enact on. So be consistent with that and don't be afraid to act on it. Just because the topic or the subject is politics doesn't mean you have to look the other way from bad behavior. So back to the supervisor piece, really discourage your supervisors or managers from any political discussions at all. And here's why, because the discrimination piece is where we could possibly get into trouble. So if you have, let's say, a manager and you end up in a political discussion with subordinates, it may evolve into the you didn't take my side because I'm X protected class, or you took my side over something when you should have taken, somebody else's side, or you may end up in a situation where harassment comes up, discrimination comes up, and you'll have a protected class individual involved. And this is where the NLRB talks about taking the managers and supervisors out of the mix. They are there to protect the employee rights of the subordinates. So be careful about that. And training is the biggest piece here. You want to make sure you train those managers, train those supervisors, give them some best practices to keep them out of those discussions or help neutralize a discussion. Figure out exactly, how do I neutralize this conversation, or how do I take the focus back to work instead of the politics, away from politics and back to work, and make sure that your supervisors and managers are trained on the way to do that and how to take that back to the focus of work and away from the political discussion. And then make sure your employees know about your policies. Same thing, we like to get everybody to go through any policy changes that you have, go over it with people, get everybody to acknowledge it, get their signature on the policies. And, it's all the same stuff. We are obligated to provide a safe work environment under OSHA guidelines. So it's important to think about that first and foremost. I have to create a safe environment for my employees. And what do you do to make sure you do that? Thinking of safety measures, respectful treatment of others, and put these things in your code of conduct. Take some time to go over your non-discrimination policies, your harassment awareness and retaliation policies, and really think about social media and how you go through this. I know I haven't changed my slide. So social media and your dress code policy, and it's a great place at this point. Most of us have a policy for these in place. But what you want to stress here is the use of social media and your business name. So if you have a policy that specifically says, do not reference us in your social media page, or anytime you're going to use the company logo, you have to run it through our marketing department. Be very specific about how you help your employees manage social media when you are involved. You can't do much to control what they do on their own as an employee of yours, but you can really stress how your logo and how your company name is used on social media. And another place to really talk about control and eliminating any political issues is with your dress code policy. If you have a policy in place that says, no logos, no buttons or pins, no, this kind of thing, limit how you manage the information that comes in. So if you have a dress code policy where sport logos are allowed, be specific and say sport logos are allowed, political logos are not. And again, that's okay to do. Or just say, you know, don't wear anything with words on it, or pictures, or logos, or anything. You have some room there. But again, with these policies and practices, please reach out and get some help on that. As always, CertaPay is here to help with that. If you need that, please reach out to us. And finally, a code of conduct. If you don't have a code of conduct in your employee handbook, put one in there and stress the expectation of behavior and being respectful of others and how you treat people and how you communicate. A code of conduct can be your roadmap and your key to getting through the next several weeks. So take a look at your language in there. And again, you can't control what people think, but you can control the expectation of behavior at work. And then we shift to the voting laws. As Cindy said, we really see some differences this year, and there are some new things. We will post the guidelines for the different state variations because some of them are different. You want to make this a non-issue. That's the biggest thing. If people need time to vote, let them go vote. Let them come in late, leave early, whatever they need to do. And these voting laws do vary, and it has to do with really giving people time to vote. A lot of the places you'll see, if somebody's shift starts within 2 hours of the polls opening or 2 hours of the polls closing, you know, then you have to allow time off. In a state like Florida, we don't have a whole lot of employer regulations surrounding voting because we have the early voting format. And so people have a huge window of time to vote. You might see some specific regulations when you have tighter timelines, but please check your state laws on this. They do vary quite a bit. And again, the easiest thing is make it a non-issue. Make it easy. Celebrate voting. Encourage people to vote. You know, that's one of the best things about being in this country is that we have the right to vote. So allow that for everybody and make it easy. All right, how we doing?
We're good. Keep going.
All right. So final thoughts. Make sure you provide a safe working environment. We're obligated to under OSHA, and it's easy to kind of create your policies and your roadmaps to get you there. Have a code of conduct and let those policies guide you through this. Be proactive. Don't be afraid to have the conversation. Have the conversation with all of your employees and say, listen, we understand that people have different views. We respect these different views. It's great that you have different views, but we're going to focus on our business and the work. We want to keep the conversations focused around work and as we move through the election season. And hopefully that will help everybody get through this with ease and get to the other side. All right, guys, thank you so much. Any questions this morning?
We do. Give me 1 second. Okay, it says an Orlando business owner sent a letter with pay stubs saying there would, can you see the chat box? Because it's really long, Rachel. It says.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, they sent a letter, obviously, with the pay stubs that they would likely be layoffs if Biden were elected. Perhaps this is technically wrong, just not wise. I don't know that I think the point of the letter was that if Biden was elected, the economy would go down and thus layoffs would have to ensue. However, with that little synopsis of what I'm gathering from the email, yes, that was somewhat very wrong. It was more or less a bully tactic, you know, letting their employees know, hey, I think my personal belief is you should vote for Trump. So that's how I would have taken that letter as an employee. But yeah, that was sticky.
Yeah, it's a great example of what I was talking about in the beginning, is you want to be careful about certainly any kind of bullying your employees about a particular direction on a vote. But the other thing that you're doing there is sending a message about your stance. And the risk here is social media. I mean, that can go viral, that can go across the country. And we've seen businesses close down as a result of losing half of their customer base. So what you're doing with this kind of statement is you're taking a stance, you're taking a side and making it known. Again, that's not illegal to do. Now, this is a little bit stronger language because the implication is that vote a particular way or you'll lose your job. So there is an issue there that is much deeper. But when you just talk about taking a particular stance, you're really risking a financial impact. And I think it's important to understand that you may be risking that before you do something like that. So I'm not sure that that's the best approach. And certainly, we do have the Voter Rights Act in place, and bullying voters is not something that we're allowed to do. Again, this is a right in this country. We all have the right to vote the way we want, and that's part of why this is so great. So, Charles, thanks for sharing that. I think it's a really good example. It shows how, as a business owner, you really have such a delicate balance, and you have to take these things into consideration and be careful because they do have a financial impact.
Here's another good one, Rachel. From a social media standpoint, if you have folks that are very active and socially and politically involved on their social media and obviously have their own personal beliefs, what if they're also displaying company information on their social media as well? How do you deal with, my personal beliefs on my social media, as well as, especially when especially when a business deals with the community on a regular basis. This so happens to be a community outreach type program company, so their social media is very important to their profile in the public.
Yeah, this is another great topic because it's very, very important for you to have a strong social media policy. And if anyone is going to mention your company on their personal social media, then you can create policies that they must run it by you. You must approve any posts that's not allowed. You can even say you are not allowed to mention the company at all. And so you want to kind of figure out what do you want your policy to look like, and then draft your policy and create the policy based on what you want the outcome to be. And again, you have to keep in mind that policy will apply to everyone. And, if you say anyone can post the company logo or post company information and personal information on the same place, you're really opening up to quite a bit of exposure there. So limiting an individual's ability to use the company name on their personal social media is a good idea. You don't want to allow them to dictate what happens to your businesses, especially the financial impact. Again, so if you have an individual who posts benign information or positive company information, but then somewhere else on their social media, they list some kind of extreme thoughts or beliefs, or post a video or post information that could be perceived as extreme, you could be associated with that. So having a strict policy about social media could be something that protects you and minimizes your risk and exposure.
Just as a follow-up to that question and to Tammy, Tammy, no, if they just have on their profile that they work for you, I don't really see that as, Rachel, basically the question is, what if they only show the company name on their profile, but they're still very radical in their comments on the website? Do you tell an employee to take your name off their profile?
I think depending on what your policy is, again, if you allow some people to post that they work for you, but not others, you have an issue. But if you have a very strict social media policy where you are not allowed to be mentioned at all on somebody's social media without approval, then that kind of gets you in the clear there. And, you know, I mean, LinkedIn is more of a professional social media platform, so that you might encourage people to take it off their everyday social posts, but maybe have a LinkedIn page where they talk about, I'm an employee at X company, and, you know, here are the things we do at our company, and it's all on a professional platform. So having the conversation might be important, but having specific language will help protect and guide in that case.
I also wanted to go back to Charles. Charles, it's a good practice to never have anything, any notification included with your paycheck unless it's company-related business. You know, whether it be the holiday party, date and time, things of that nature. Don't you agree, Rachel?
What was that one?
As far as putting a comment in the pay stub about if Biden was elected, layoffs would be forthcoming. I think it's just best to stick to company-related topics only, and nothing personal, nor nothing above and beyond any company-related issues or things that need to be addressed, or, like I said, the Christmas party, whatever the case may be. Other than company-related, nothing should be included in a paycheck.
Especially if you have a policy that limits political discussions and political communication. Now, if that particular company feels threatened by potential layoffs coming, then why have the political piece included? Simply state, you know, just letting everybody know there is a chance that in the new year we will have to make a reduction in force. We might have to make some staffing changes. Just giving you a heads up now. So you don't have to say any political pieces in that. And if that particular company has a policy limiting political discussions, then they're actually violating their own policy.
That was all the questions I have, unless anybody has any other questions.
I think I saw one up here from Melody.
I already took care of that one privately.
Oh, okay. Oh, you got it.
I mean, if you want to go ahead and address it, that's fine. The question, I mean, might as well throw it out to everybody. It's always good to learn. Is it allowable for a director to discuss his or her salary with a subordinate? It's not illegal to discuss pay in the workplace. However, it's highly unprofessional of a director to be discussing their pay with their employees. I think that's more of a performance issue on unprofessionalism than it is a legal issue.
And to piggyback on those comments, also keep in mind the NLRB will work to help protect the employees' rights to discuss that. So the subordinates can discuss anything connected to the work, their wages, their conditions, their benefits, their safety. They can discuss that all they want, and they're protected under the NLRA. But your directors and senior leaders don't have the same protections. And just like Cindy said, it really comes down to more of a discussion about performance. And you know, is that something that really you shouldn't, and that's kind of more of a procedures thing. Like if you have somebody who is discussing his or her own pay with a subordinate, then that's a person who's possibly creating some conflict. So you're having a disciplinary discussion about that. If that person wants to complain up, that's better to do. And so, you know, if you've got somebody who is talking about it for whatever reason, it may be worth a conversation to say, you know, listen, if you're not happy with this, we need to have the conversation and get this ironed out, but be careful not to complain down.
Just to actually ask you a question, Rachel, you said that a director or upper management executive position would not be subject to the same rights as like an hourly employee talking about their pay. So what would be the difference there? I mean, why is the director held to a higher standard
It's not a higher or lower standard. It's just what the protections are under the NLRA. It's specifically for subordinates. It's not so much for the directors and leaders. And so those kinds of conversations where, and the concept can be that that behavior is potentially disruptive. So if you had a director or senior leader who was having conversations with subordinates about his financial or her financial arrangements with the company, that the idea is that's potentially disruptive behavior. So you're talking about behavior issues. And just like Cindy, just like you said, the important thing is to have the conversation about the behavior and, you know, following the code of conduct, following your company policies and procedures, and figure out why that's potentially an issue, getting to the bottom of it that way.
That was all the questions I had, unless anybody has any others. We're good on time, so you're more than welcome to type away.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thank you again for joining us. We're so glad you're here. We're doing coffee breaks every other Thursday, 11:30. And like Cindy said, this will be on our website later today. We will also post the state-by-state chart that shows voting requirements. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We are glad you're here. We're here to help you. And we thank you for your time. We thank you for your business. And we are looking forward to success as we roll through the end of the year and start another year strong. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you.
Okay,